Well, it's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Dragons!
Oh my god, he just ran in.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 16 of LFR, the casual podcast for casual players of the world of Warcraft, where we make the lore of Warcraft more accessible than Norse mythology. It's public domain, you can just steal stuff from it. Right, Blizzard? I'm your host, Dracoris. LFR usually stands for Looking for Raid, but this week it stands for Lore Freaking Rules, because I've really missed talking about this stuff with you guys. Unfortunately this week I am talking about it alone. Between one thing and another, Sirithe and I were unable to get our schedules to sync this time out, and we didn't want to put the episode off for another week, so here I am. I'm really hoping that it's not going to feel too stilted and weird, just me talking on my own. But either way, we should have Sirithe back next episode. So, thank you all for joining us for another episode diving into an aspect of lore in the world of Warcraft. This week, we are going to discuss the Titan Keepers. I'm really excited to get into this stuff, and I hope you are too. It's a really interesting area of lore, actually, because it's all stuff that's maybe going to get changed going forward, but equally it's stuff that's set out fairly clearly in Chronicles as it stands. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to look back at this episode in a couple of years' time when we've got another expansion and more source books and what have you, to see how much of it still stands the test of time. First though, we do have some other segments to get to.
You love me! You really love me!
So there are no new reviews this week, and that's completely understandable. Look, reviewing Blizzard podcasts isn't exactly something that's been a priority for a lot of people over the last few weeks, and that's fine. I'm right there with you. I haven't left a review for any new podcasts in the last month, I don't think. If you guys do want to leave us a review, and you want to give us something to say in this slot next episode, please do go to either your preferred podcast platform or the Warcraft radio directory. Now, before we do go into the lore, we should see what's going on in Warcraft news this week. So, unsurprisingly, the Blizzard lawsuit stuff is still ongoing. But we talked about that last episode, and if I get onto it again, there probably won't be any time to talk about the lore. Look, briefly, the suit has been updated to include temporary workers, which is a good thing. It's also been updated to include allegations that HR have been shredding documents to cover shit up, which is not a good thing. If you want to hear more on that particular topic, right now we're not the guys to be listening to. If you search for Countdown to Classic on any podcast provider, you will find Josh Corbett's show. Now, he did an episode with Jessica Gonzalez of Blizzard, who has been very vocal on Twitter about all of this. She's at BlizzJess if you want to go and follow her. And she did an incredible episode talking about the Blizzard stuff, but also about kind of the role of a QA in game development generally. And it's a really, really good listen, which I would absolutely advise people to go and listen to. Now, the other news this week, which is much more positive, is we've had some blue posts about the content of 9.1.5. There's going to be some more customization for for a bunch of the allied races. The ones that got the short straw previously, the Nightborn, the Void Elves, the Lightforce Draenei. We're also getting the removal of the AoE cap. We're getting, they're doing away with conduit energy, and you can now freely switch your Covenant. There's also going to be a more skip. You can skip the Covenant campaign if you've done it before on your alts. There's all kinds of quality of life shit that's going on. That's all going to be with us in 9.1.5. So yeah, it's very interesting stuff, and hopefully it's going to make the game more enjoyable again for people who've been finding it less enjoyable recently. Hopefully. While we're in this news section, this is also where we talk about our patrons. So we have one new patron since the last regular episode, and that is Discordian Kitty. Now, she is one of our AOTC patrons, so she will be getting her name read out every single episode until she decides we're not worth the money anymore. The other patrons who are in that boat are Mud from Gratz, Gershon, Sky Shrouder, and now Anna, who has upped her pledge to AOTC and will be getting a shout out every single episode. I would also like to make a point of crediting our other patrons this week. That's Scissorlord and Vanderlyle. The reason I'm crediting them this week, despite not being in the AOTC tier and not getting the every episode shout out, is because we made a donation to RAIN last month, rainn.org, and all of these patrons contributed to that. We asked on Discord, and every single one of them supported the donation, which is an incredible thing to be able to say about a group of people, and we are really happy that our show is being supported by people who also support a good cause. So we matched their donation, and we doubled it as well, because we thought that was something worth doing. If you do want to sign on to that, and if you want to join our Patreon and help fund this podcast, the address for that is www.patreon.com/LFRWowcast. Now, I guess we should move on to our next segment, which is to see whether there's anybody looking for somebody to play with this week.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine?
So, there isn't. Same as with the reviews, I think. This is not a time where people have been thinking about, trying to grow their guilds particularly. But hey, look, if your guild is looking for members, or even if you just want to shout your guild out for being fantastic, hit us up on Twitter or by email, and we'll give them a shout out here. We should probably move on to talk about the law.
And how is education supposed to make me feel smarter? Besides, every time I learn something new, it pushes some old stuff out of my brain.
So look, traditionally, each episode, I ask my partner Lou what she knows about the topic at hand. Lou has been playing WoW since MOP, and she has therefore played a hell of a lot more WoW than I ever have. That said, she also clicks through quest text, hasn't read any of the novels, and fell asleep the one time I did try to read one to her. In short, she's pretty much our target audience. So this week, I asked Lou what she knew about the Titan Keepers. And she said that one of them is a sun god or something. She mentioned that they were in dungeons and raids in Northrend. And from there, she did a pretty good job of basically describing Ulduar without saying the word Ulduar. I don't think she did a bad job, but I think we can probably do a better one. There are quite a lot of Titan Keepers, or rather, there are quite a lot of Titan Watchers, and it gets difficult to see which are Keepers and which aren't, and how many are there, what are their names. So let's find out.
I have witnessed the rise and fall of empires.
So look, who and what are the Titan Keepers? Well, to answer that question, you first kind of need to know what the Titans are. There are going to be some semantics in this episode. Basically, look, the Titans are an entire race of massive planet-sized humanoids. And we honestly don't know how many there are. The Titans as a race includes Azeroth. It includes Argus. But that said, the phrase the Titans, generally speaking, has become mostly synonymous with the Pantheon, who are a specific group of Titans who take credit for ordering the cosmos. Now, our understanding of the Titans is something that is absolutely going to change over the next few years, with the lore becoming more epic in scope. The cosmic disco war, as Taliesin refers to it. And with us discovering entire pantheons that have nothing to do with the Titans. Like, the Eternal Ones in Shadowlands, or the Pantheon of Life that we're told Elune inhabits. There's a lot left to learn, and power creep seems to be in full effect. But, until the latest expansion, the Titans were the closest thing to actual gods that we had in the Warcraft universe. While they didn't create the universe, that accolade now seems to be going to the first ones, they sure as hell created most of the life that we are familiar with. Now, as part of ordering Azeroth, the Titans populated it with creatures of their own making, and these creatures were called the Titanforged. Now, those Titanforged were split into two distinct groups, the Aesir and the Vanir. If those names sound familiar to you from outside of WoW, you either watched some Marvel movies, or you're the same kind of mythology geek that I am, in which case some of this will be retreading old ground for you, but hopefully it'll still be informative. So, WoW's version of the Aesir and the Vanir are respectively the Titanforged made from metal, who command storms, and the Titanforged made from stone, who command the earth. The first generation of these Titanforged, both the Aesir and the Vanir, are called Titanic Watchers. Some of these Watchers were imbued by the Pantheon with their specific likenesses and powers. Those are the Titan Keepers. So there are 9 of them. We have Arcadis, Loken, Thorim, Freya, Mimiron, Hodir, Tyr, Ra, and Odin. These 9, their job was to lead the Titan-forged armies against the Black Empire, and later to create most of their sort of lesser brethren and shape the world. Those lesser brethren would include things like the Vrykul, who would eventually evolve into humans, the Earthen, who eventually became dwarves, the Mechanomes, who eventually became gnomes, who eventually became Mechanomes again. Circle of life? I don't know. But yeah, all bar one of the Titan Keepers are named for a mythological god or figure from real-world mythology. Some of these are really obvious. The name either not changed at all, or, one letter changed or something. And some of them are slightly less obvious. But we're going to work our way through them one by one. Now, we're going to start with the odd one out. Arcadis. He's listed as a Titan Keeper. But honestly, I would have had him pegged as a Watcher, a rung down from the others. And if he hadn't been imbued with power directly by Khaz'goroth, I'd have left him off the list. As it is, Arcadis is a guardian of the Discs of Norgannon, and he has power over the Earth and the Forge. He's the guy who made the Heart Chamber that we spent so much time in during BFA. He isn't based on any mythological figure as far as I can see, although he does have elements of, say, Hephaestus, the Greek god of the Forge. If anybody does know who or what Arcadis is supposed to be based on, please do get in touch and let us know. Because I would love to, not so much publisher attraction, but I'd love to be able to, let everybody know that in the next episode. And that's about it for Arcadis. There really isn't a lot to say about the guy. We're going to move on from him to someone there is a lot to say about. Odin. Odin, in World of Warcraft, is the leader of the Keepers. He's imbued with power by Aman'Thul, the Titan-in-Chief, the All-Father, and he had the title of Prime Designate of the Keepers. This was because he kicked Ragnaros' ass up between his ears, and came up with the plan to imprison Yogg-Saron. So for his daring and leadership, he was basically given the control, the leadership title. Now, at some point, the other Keepers decided to pass on powers to the dragon aspects. And Odin just said no. So, fuck that, I'm not giving my power to dragons. We are the only ones who should be, ordering and assisting with the world. When the other Keepers decided to go and give the dragon aspects their powers anyway, Odin had a hissy fit. He severed a portion of Ulduar, the Titan Keeper's home base that surrounded Yogg-Saron, and he levitated it, creating the Halls of Valor, his kind of fortress in the sky. He basically said, fuck you all, and relinquished his title of Prime Designate and removed himself from the situation. Sometime later, he sacrificed his eye to Mwazala, a death god who we now know to be an ally of the Jailer, in exchange for the ability to peer into the Shadowlands. When he did that, he saw the Kyrian, and he was inspired by them to make something similar of his own. I'm just saying, right, Carestia the Firstborn, whatever her name is, the Archon, she really should have filed a patent. She should have got herself a lawyer. She should have, filed copyright, because Odin just ripped her off. So what he did was he told his Vrykul, who were his followers, a sort of proto-human species, that any who died a worthy death in battle would have their spirits brought to the halls of Valor and be given new immortal bodies, infused with the power of the storm, to fight as his Valar forever. Odin figured, immortal storm warriors, that's much better than dragons, right? I'm going to show the rest of the keepers. He had a little problem, though. In order to retrieve the spirits of the deceased, he would first need some Vrykul to volunteer to become Valkyr. Creatures inspired by the Kyrian he'd seen, these winged soul-bearer forms that he'd invented. Because once he did that, he could send them to go and fetch some spirits for him and kind of get the ball rolling. Unfortunately, nobody volunteered. We've all been there, right? We've all been in this work meeting where, the manager tries to get someone to do overtime or something and says, so any volunteers? And no hands go up, right? And it just gets more and more awkward. That's what this was like. Now, Odin had an adopted daughter, a Titan-forged being named Helya. And Helya tried to talk Odin out of this. Instead, Odin forcibly transformed Helya into the first Valkyr and ordered her to do the job for him. Helya, understandably, was pissed for thousands of years. Odin took his adopted daughter and turned her into this entirely new species of being, with these duties and these tasks that she had to fulfill. So yeah, Helya was pissed. Eventually, she was convinced by another keeper, Loken, to turn against Odin. Not that it probably took much convincing. Helya used the same magic that had been used to lock the elemental planes. She used that magic to seal Odin and the Valar away inside the halls of Valor. And then she decided to steal a bunch of his souls and take them to her new realm of Helheim. She started to kind of build her own base of power against Odin, Now eventually, we turn up and we defeat Helya and free Odin from his curse. Although he still seems to be sitting on his arse when we last checked him at the start of 9.1. He's at this point he is free to leave Skyhold, to leave the halls of Valor, but he's still just sort of sitting there. He does send us to take out the Eye of the Jailer, and he does give us a magic horn and some Valkyr to do that with, but he doesn't actually move his arse and do anything himself. Now Odin, unsurprisingly, is based on Odin, the sort of chief of the Norse pantheon of gods, the head deity there, the guy who's the father of all the other gods. It's interesting, actually, Odin in Norse mythology has the title Allfather, which is the title of Aman'Thul, the Titan who empowered Warcraft's Odin. Now, Odin with an eye, the Norse pantheon god Odin, was the god of magic and wisdom. This Odin is obviously... Honestly, he's an infinitely more interesting character than the guy we get in Warcraft. Both of them give up an eye for wisdom, but the Norse Odin also hangs himself on a world tree for 9 days. He steals the gift of poetry from the giants, and then gives it to humans. He does a whole bunch of other cool shit. He has a spear that never misses. He has an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir, that is also his grandson. It's kind of weird. But yeah, original Norse Odin is incredibly cool. He also takes it upon himself quite often to walk among people and kind of keep up to date with the times, apparently. Odin also marshals the forces against Ragnarok, the Norse end of the world scenario. Warcraft's Odin, by contrast, goes and hides in the clouds. He marshalled forces against Ragnaros, the Fire Lord, back at the beginning of the backstory, and I don't think that's accidental. It's a nice piece of wordplay, but I think mythological Odin is infinitely braver and infinitely more heroic than Warcraft Odin. There are a lot of people out there still waiting for Odin, Warcraft Odin, to get his comeuppance, and frankly I'm one of them. Next one on our list is Loken. Now, Loken was a Titan Keeper who was given power by Norgannon. Norgannon was a Titan who had two gifts to pass on, and the one he chose to pass to Loken was the mastery of magic. Now, Loken was kind of a dick. He had an affair with Sif, the wife of his brother Thorim. While this affair was going on, the old god Yogg-Saron whispered to Loken and made him paranoid. And as a result, he lashed out and killed Sif. This started a whole kind of snowball rolling down a hill scenario where every single attempt that Loken made to cover up what he'd done basically just ended up making things worse. He attempts to kill his colleague Mimiron. He talks Thorim, his brother, into starting a war with the Frost Giants. He convinces Helya to imprison Odin, and then usurps his position as Prime Designate. And he sets things up so that anyone who tries to kill him will set off Algalon, who is a celestial who would re-originate the world, basically glassing the planet and starting over. He literally tries to make it so that if he dies, it will herald the end of the world. It's not hard to see that he's based on one of the more famous Norse gods, Loki. In the Eddas, the source mythology for, the Norse mythology, Loki starts the ball rolling for Ragnarok, the end of the world. And he largely does it by being a sly, conniving little shit. Loki is intelligent, often has an adversarial relationship with his brother Thor, and has an aptitude for both magic and talking his way out of trouble. In various stories, admittedly more Marvel than classic Norse mythology, Loki imprisons or otherwise does away with Odin and impersonates him. The only thing you could maybe say in WoW Loken's favour is that he was corrupted by Yogg-Saron, but he was already an adulterer before that. Neither of these guys are great dudes. Tom Hiddleston's excellent turn as Loki notwithstanding, right, because that guy is phenomenal. But look, Loki in the Eddas, he's an interesting, multifaceted character, but he is absolutely a villain. One of the things he did is, out of spite, he engineered the death of another god. There's a whole story that's really worth looking up about Balder, who is the favoured son of Odin, the beautiful god, who basically Odin had a prophecy that Balder would be killed. So what he did was he went around and tried to basically make insurance against that. He asked for every object in the world to pledge that it wouldn't kill Balder. But he missed out mistletoe, he overlooked mistletoe. And what Loki did then was he managed to fashion a spear with mistletoe on the tip and gave it to a blind god and convinced that blind god to throw it at Balder, thus leading to his death. He did that basically for shits and giggles and out of jealousy. Loki is not a good guy, and Tom Hiddleston is convincing a lot of people of something very different at the moment. But he is a layered, faceted character. Another thing that Loki did in the source materials, he once shapeshifted into a female horse and had sex with a male horse. There was a good reason for it. He did it to distract the horse, so the horse wouldn't assist a giant in building a massive wall that would have got Loki in a lot of trouble. But he did it. He had sex with this male horse and then carried that horse's child to term and gave it to his dad as a mount. The Norse had some really interesting ideas about divinity and what did and didn't constitute godly behaviour. Let's put it that way. Interestingly, Loki is also the father of Hel, on whom Warcraft's Helya is based. So you can see where the parallels with Loken aren't just his name. They're both kind of a dick. They're both very good at magic. They both have this bad relationship with their brother. And at the end of the day, they both cause a hell of a lot of problems. Loken's attempt at causing the end of the world is basically only stopped by us. And that's our job as video game protagonists, The Norse mythology doesn't have a video game protagonist to save everybody, and in that scenario, Loki does manage to end the world. So the next Titan Keeper on our list is Thorim. Thorim was a Titan Keeper who was empowered by Golganeth with the power of thunder. There's not much subtlety here, okay? Thorim, with the power of thunder, has a massive hammer, which is called Krolmir. He is best known for, one, believing Loken's bullshit about what happened with Sif, and starting a war with some frost giants as a result, and then for taking a Malfurion-sized nap. He sleeps for thousands of years. We wake his ass up eventually, we take him to fight Loken, whereupon he kills Loken, setting off a potential end of the world scenario as mentioned previously. Thorim is not the sharpest can opener in the drawer, and in that respect he has a lot in common with his inspiration, Thor, the Norse god of thunder. Thor has more muscles than brains. He frequently trusts his brother Loki, even though he knows it's a stupid idea to do that, and he really, really likes his hammer, Mjolnir. Thor in the Marvel comics and the movies, cool dude, hero. Thor in the original source mythos, look, he's a force of nature, sure. He's strong, sure. He has a role to play in everything, being the god of thunder and storms, yeah, definitely. But he's not really a hero, and Thorim lines up pretty well with that. His role in the story, he certainly has a job to do. He does it to a degree before Loken gets in the way. And then he fucks up and kills Loken when that was not a good idea. Luckily, we pull his arse out of the fire. So the next Titan Keeper on our list is Freya. Freya was imbued with power by Einar, the Titan of Life. The whole Titan of Life thing is really weird, given that the Titans are the pantheon of order. And, of course, we now know that there is a whole pantheon of life, which includes Elune. But, yeah, maybe it includes Einar as well. We don't really know at this point. Everything I'm about to say about Freya is taken from Chronicles Volume 1. Okay? It is... Chronicles has been exposed as kind of not being from an omniscient narrator's perspective. It is from a fixed perspective. It is from a Titan-centric perspective. And all the stuff I'm about to say about Freya may well end up getting retconned as we find out more about the Pantheon of Life. With that caveat kind of out there, Chronicles says that Freya is the creator of the Emerald Dream, which functions as a blueprint of Azeroth. Some believe that Freya wove the Emerald Dream into being from nothing. Others claim that this strange place had always existed in some form, a dream born from Azeroth's slumbering world soul. It is said that Freya tapped into this realm and moulded what would become known as the Emerald Dream as a way to commune with the nascent Titan Azeroth. Freya was one of the keepers who passed on power to the dragon aspects, sharing her gifts from Einar with Alexstrasza and Ysera of the Dragonflights. Fairly straightforwardly, Freya is based on the Norse goddess Freya, with a J. The goddess of beauty, fertility, and love. There are no real surprises to be had there. Freya is one of those goddesses who, unfortunately, partly due to the male-centric nature of things, is that there aren't that many cool stories about Freya, unfortunately, and that kind of goes for the WoW Freya and the Norse goddess. The next one on our list is Mimiron. Mimiron was given power by Norgannon, who we've mentioned previously. Norgannon gave his gifts to Mimiron and to Loken. Loken got the magic, Mimiron got the massive intellect. In the backstory, he and Loken teamed up and they battled and entrapped Neptulon the Tidehunter, the kind of water elemental lord. More interestingly though, after Loken went batshit crazy because of Yogg-Saron's influence, he tried to arrange Mimiron's death in a freak lab accident. Mimiron's followers managed to save him, and they put his consciousness into a big old mechanome body, keeping him alive, but also apparently driving him bugfuckeringly insane. Mimiron is the reason we have goblins too. He experimented on some lower life forms with Khajiit, and basically sped up their evolution and their intellect, and boom, goblins. So, boom, goblins, explosions. Kind of works. The last reason that Mimiron is particularly notable in-game is that in BFA, when Mother is checking on all the Titan facilities and finally gets around to Ulduar, Mimiron basically hangs up on her, which is hilarious to me. He's your typical mad scientist type. He's too busy working, don't call. Mimiron's name is based on Mimir, the uncle of Odin, who guards the Well of Mimir, which is sort of like a font of wisdom in Norse mythology. It's Mimir that Norse Odin made the whole eye for wisdom trade with, although in WoW lore that's Mwisela. In terms of his actual characterization though, Mimiron doesn't really resemble any of the Norse pantheon. His kind of inventor-type character mostly kind of correlates with like a smith from that period, and none of the Norse gods were really smiths. They tended to pay others to do that sort of thing, or make deals, trade in kind. Mimiron more resembles someone like Hephaestus of the Greek pantheon, maybe, or Vulcan from the Roman one. The Norse pantheon did have sort of crafters and smiths. The most famous were two dwarf brothers called Brock and Eitri, and those guys are kind of Mimiron-esque, I suppose. But with the name being such a dead ringer for Mimir, it's kind of hard to imagine that there's any more to that than that. The next one on our list is Hodir. And that's not Hodor, before any of you come at me with Game of Thrones references. Hodir in WoW is one of two keepers to be imbued with the power of Golgoneth, which was the dude who gave Thorim his power. He is imbued with dominion over the skies, which in-game basically seems to have translated to frost. He's probably based on two different characters. Hod, the blind Norse god who was tricked by Loki into killing Balder that I mentioned earlier, and Hymir, a frost giant who had some interactions with Thor. Seeing as Hodir and Thorim were both blessed by Golgoneth, there definitely is some sort of connection there. So the next Titan Keeper on our list is Tyr. Now Tyr is a fucking badass. He is probably the best warrior of the entire bunch. Tyr was empowered by Agramar, who was the kind of the fighter of the pantheon. What he was imbued with was strength and courage. Now, as the mightiest of the keepers, he was armed with an immense hammer known as the Silver Hand. Whether the hammer was called the Silver Hand back then or not entirely sure. The reason I say that is that Tyr was directly involved in empowering the dragon aspects, and he actually lost a hand fighting a giant proto-dragon monster named Galakrond. When he lost that hand, he replaced it with a silver hand, literally made of actual silver. And yeah, so that was a thing. And that is where the Paladin Order of the Silver Hand gets their logo and their inspiration from. Tyr eventually died fighting Loken. Now, he is based on Tyr, the Norse god of single combat, valour and glory. Tyr was also the god of law, interestingly enough. Now, Norse Tyr lost a hand to Fenrir, the giant wolf, and is often depicted as being eventually killed by Garm, the Hellhound, as part of Ragnarok. Ragnarok, the Norse end of the world, was brought about via the machinations of Loki, so it's fair to say that, you know, Tyr is killed by a minion of Loki. Warcraft's Tyr being killed by Loken can be seen as just sort of cutting out the middleman there, you know. There's definitely the analogy to be made. The last of our Titan Keepers is Ra, also known as Ra-Den by his followers. Now, he's a really interesting one. We said that Arcadis was the odd one out, and that's absolutely true. But Ra is an odd one out in his own way. He's absolutely based on a mythological figure, or two actually, but they aren't Norse in origin. So, much like Odin, High Keeper Ra, or Ra-Den, was empowered by Amun-Thul, the High Father of the Pantheon. Ra, though, had a lot less to do with the other keepers and all of their kind of Loken-centric bullshit. He was off doing more important things. He discovered the remnants of the slain old god Yasaj. Yasaj? I can never quite pronounce that name, I'm afraid. Including its big creepy heart. Ra made the vault of Yasaj to keep it away from, you know, any shady fucks who might want to do weird shit with it. I'm looking at you, Garrosh Hellscream. And he assigned his Mogu servants to watch over it and the surrounding lands and keep it safe. Ra then installed the Forge of Origination and created the Titan facility Uldum to keep track of it. Then he went on to Silithus and he made Anchorage to serve as a prison for the old god Cthulhu. So, like, Ra was a really busy dude. You know, it seems like most of the other keepers were kept busy in and around, you know, dealing with Yogg-Saron. Ra went and dealt with what was left of Yasaj and dealt with Cthulhu pretty much by himself. He then spent the following ages roaming and watching over the southern regions of Azeroth. The Mogu who answered directly to Ra were known as the Rajani, and we meet them during BFA in patch 9.3. Now, Ra was present during the empowering of the proto-dragons, in the creation of the 5 dragonflights, you know, the aspects. He channeled the powers of his creator Amun-Thul into the bronze dragon Nozdormu, granting him power over time. Ra was also the keeper who actually realised that the Titans were dead, and as a result he removed the essence of Amun-Thul from himself and hid it in a vessel, before falling into a stupor. Something that Ra does a lot, unfortunately. Lei Shen, the Mogu king, found Ra in his stupor, sucker punched him and stole all of his shit, including the power of Amun-Thul. Lei Shen dubbed himself the Thunder King and established a tyrannical rule over Pandaria until the time of his death. Ra-Den himself was confined to a hidden cell beneath the Thunder King's capital, the Throne of Thunder. Thousands of years later, we find Ra and free him. And, you know, kick his ass, because that's the way things go. In BFA, when we go to Ra and his Rajani for help in sort of curtailing N'Zoth's bullshit in Pandaria, he says that we can't do it. There's no hope. You've got no chance. Go away. We obviously don't listen, and we pester him, and, you know, we hang around and do some dailies for him until he changes his mind. We do cheer him up in the end, and we get him out of his funk, and he helps us, to the point where he essentially sacrifices himself to buy us some time to save the Chamber of the Heart against N'Zoth. He then pops up as a corrupted raid boss in Nyalotha, where, sadly, we have to kill him, once and for all. Ra was based on the Egyptian sun god, Ra. His title, Ra-Den, is actually a reference to Raiden, or Ray Jin, the Japanese god of thunder. Interestingly, Ra, the sun god, the Egyptian sun god, has kind of a dualistic aspect to him. So, as the sun god, as Ra, he was a creator, a builder, something that we very much have seen with, Ra in Warcraft. He went around and he installed the Forge of Origination, he built Uldum, he built the Vault of Yasaj, he built Ankaraj. Now, one thing that does happen with Ra, the Egyptian god, is at one point in his story he passes into the underworld, where his nature changes, and that is sadly what happens to Ra in Warcraft. He passes through to Ny'alotha, where he is corrupted, and he does become a raid boss, and in the end, unfortunately, we do actually have to kill him, and that actually does jibe really well with Ra, the sun god. And it's interesting to me because it makes me wonder whether all along they'd kind of planned for this to happen with this character. Because if they haven't, it's some very good writing on the fly, and if they have, it's some really good long-term planning. The references to Ray Jin, however, the Japanese god of thunder, and Raiden, which is the more sort of Western pronunciation, his involvement does just seem to be the fact that he is a thunder-based god, and so is Ra. There doesn't seem to be any more to it than that. When you look at the god of thunder, Ray Jin or Raiden, his personality doesn't seem to mesh with Ra's. He's sometimes seen as like a trickster god, very angry. There isn't much really to put them on all fours. I just think it's kind of cool that they, the title they gave him that takes his name from Ra to Ra-Den, actually takes his name to something more resembling a thunder god rather than a sun one. So this is the point now where we have in fact covered all 9 of the Titan Keepers, and ordinarily this is the point where we'll be having a chat with Sirithe to see what he thought about all of this and get his input. Unfortunately, that's not something we can do right now, but what I will do, just to try and wrap things up, is pass on some interesting information about the days of the week. So the days of the week in English are actually mostly named after Norse gods, and the ones who they are named after all actually feature here as Titan Keepers. So Tuesday is Tyr's Day. Wednesday was called Woden's Day, which comes from Odin's Day. Thursday is Thor's Day, obviously that's Thorim. And Friday is Freya's Day. Also sometimes Frigg's Day, but Frigg and Freya are 2 goddesses that are often conflated in Norse mythology. Saturday and Sunday aren't really relevant. Saturday is named after Saturn, which obviously doesn't have any play here. Sunday is named after the sun, so I'm kind of giving that one to Ra. And Monday is named after the moon. Now you would think that I can't tie that in anywhere, right? What do you do when you moon someone? You show your ass. Loken is an ass. So I'm giving Monday to Loken. From now on, I am calling Mondays Loken's Day, because Mondays suck, and so does Loken. It makes sense on so many levels.
What little time you had, you wasted. My death heralds the end of this world.
So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed my analysis of the Titan Keepers and how they do or don't relate to various mythological figures. We are hoping that next week, well, 2 weeks from now, we will be back in your ears with another episode with both of us. And actually we've got a pretty big lore character planned for that episode. So I'm hoping you guys are going to love it. And we are going to have a tweet letting you guys know about that fairly soon. But in the meantime, we hope you guys have a great couple of weeks, and we will be back in your ears soon. If you guys want to know where you can find us on the internet, my erstwhile co-host is at Sirithe. I am at Smiting Titan. The show is at LFR Wowcast. You can email us on lfrwowpod@gmail.com. And if you do want to sign up to Patreon, it's www.patreon.com/LFRWowcast. Hope you guys have a great couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
I am very uncomfortable with the energy that we've created in the studio today.